So hello out there in DevOps land. Welcome to the Microsoft DevOps user group. And we're so excited at the content we have today. Um, we have Donovan Brown, but before we get to him, just wanted to give you folks who have not been to a Microsoft DevOps user group meeting a little bit information about the group. You can find the group at meetup.com, and the browser is right here in front of you on your screen. Sign up, participate in discussions, and see what the schedule has for us on into 2018. We have some really exciting content and presentation plans that are in the works. This group is always free. Dues are paid for by sponsors, any expenses that we would incur. And so that's the way we run the community here. This is completely online user group. We do have some in-person events in various places along the way, but we keep with a routine of monthly presentations just like this one. So look for the schedule on the meetup group. And our video and online sponsor is ClearMeasure, software engineering firm based in Austin, Texas. And we live and die by sponsors. So if you have a connection with anyone who would like to participate in supporting the community, please send a message on the meetup group, and we'll gladly take that support and get them involved. So I'd like to introduce Donovan Brown. He is a principal DevOps manager for Microsoft. He is the manager of the League of Extraordinary Cloud DevOps Advocates. They are a collection of cloud DevOps advocates. They span DevOps, Windows, Linux, app services, containers, and even Jenkins and VSTS. No matter what language you program in or what resources in Azure you want to target, they have you covered. And he's going to be at Microsoft Build and is bringing the entire league with him. So he'll be speaking to us today on mobile DevOps, and we're really excited. So Donovan, take it away.
Thank you so much. Well, you just went through my first two slides, right? You kind of stole a little bit of my thunder there talking about the league, but I am so excited to be here, and I am the manager of the league. Most people just call us the league because saying the whole name is way too long. So I get tripped up when I say it sometimes. So if you do want to get a hold of us, though, we are really active on Twitter. So you can actually use this little hashtag here, which is just the initials of our name. So League of Extraordinary Cloud DevOps Advocates. If you actually use that hashtag, it lights up a team room, and it's kind of like a bat signal. Because when we see that room go bold, that means someone just tweeted using that particular hashtag, and the entire league goes and reads it. And if we don't know the answer, we will reach inside of Microsoft and we will find someone and add them to that thread that does know the answer to the question that you're asking. So if it's about Azure, about DevOps, even if it's not, sometimes I've been lucky enough to find people, but that's our focus, and feel free to use that hashtag to get answers from us whenever you need it. I recently tweeted a video that I want to share with you right now that I thought really encapsulated what your company could look like before and after it implements DevOps. I think implementing DevOps at your organization gives you the ability to move faster than you've ever moved before. So what I want to do first off is share this video with you, and then we're going to break it down before we get started into the main presentation.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stops.
So when I tweeted that video, it was pretty well received, but I got 2 people who actually challenged me saying that there was no additional value added in the second pit stop, although it's so obviously faster than the first. The first argument I got was there's so many more people in the second pit stop than the first. Of course it was faster. And then I got someone who said, but they didn't even refuel the car in the second video. The more I thought about it, the more I thought they're just simply wrong. The more I think about it, the more I think this is an amazing analogy for what DevOps can do for your organization. And I broke it down in a blog post, which I'm going to share some of the high points of it with you here. The increase in the number of people. I've been writing software for a long time. I started my career back at Compact Computer. So I live actually right down the street. I live here in Houston. I live right down the street from the headquarters of HP, which used to be Compact. And I remember when it was time to deploy software into production, I would go into the lab, find the production server, and just log in with my own credentials, copy whatever files I needed where I needed them, and then I would be done. Now, that's not even possible. There's dev, there's ops, there's security, there's auditing, there's quality assurance, there's program managers. There's just so many people involved in deploying software. So I thought this was a perfect analogy, because if you look at what deploying software was a decade ago and what it looks like today, there are a lot more people involved than there used to be. But I think about it differently. When I saw all these individuals, I didn't see them as people. I saw them as the processes that we linked together to make sure that we can move faster than we ever have before. I saw continuous integration, continuous delivery, infrastructure as code, good DevOps practices for your source control. I did not see them as people, but as the processes that we run. And I saw a lot of analogies here and overlaps of what we do in a DevOps pipeline. The goal of DevOps is to deliver value. And to know if you delivered value, you have to monitor your application while it's running in production. The 2 gentlemen up here in the right-hand corner, they never move. They are literally just monitoring this pit stop to see how they can take this 3-second pit stop and make it a 2-second pit stop. How they can shave another 1/10 or 1,000th of a second off of their pipeline. And that's what they're actually doing there. And then I also noticed that a lot of our customers want to have backups and recoveries. What if something bad happens, Donovan? Is there a way for us to roll back or protect ourselves? If you look again, there's a gentleman back here with a jack that jacks up the rear of the car. Right behind him is another individual with a jack that is never used, but is there just in case something bad happens. The more I watch this, the more I realize that this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing when you implement DevOps at your organizations. Taking lots of little processes that are repeatable, fast, stitching them together so that you can move faster than you've ever moved before. But I saw them as automation, not as people. Let's address the second item. They did not refuel the car. The fact that they stated that means that they're not even looking at this correctly. It wasn't the fact that they did not refuel the car. It's the fact that they did not have to refuel the car. Drastically different statements. What they were able to do is shift this left. I was always taught you need to focus on what hurts most first. If you look at this very first pit stop, they're done fueling the car halfway through the pit stop, which means even if we fueled the car at the same rate, in the second pit stop, we still would have been done in half the time because that wasn't what hurt the most. What hurt the most was how long it takes them to change the tires. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but in my mind, what I see happening is they fixed the tire problem. They were now able to change all 4 tires, not just 2 of them in 67 seconds, but all 4 of them in 3 seconds. And they're sitting there waiting another 25 seconds for this poor guy to stop fueling the car. So now it was time to focus on the fueling of the car. And what they did is they shifted left technology, innovation, such that they did not have to refuel the car. That car is now able to go further on less. Trust me, if that car needed fuel to finish the race, they would have refilled that car, but they did not have to. Shifting left is writing your unit test early, doing your security scans early, making the tires more efficient, making the car more efficient so that you can move faster than you've ever done before. You don't want to be swinging a hammer at a tire. You want to be doing this. Because if you don't and your competition does, you're going to lose that race. So the more I watch this, the more I realize that this is an amazing analogy for what your company can look like before and after you implement DevOps. Now, I've said DevOps several times, and it's in my title, and a lot of people always want to say, well, what is it? If I ask 5 people for a definition of DevOps, I'll probably get 10 answers because no one can seem to crystallize what its goal and what its purpose is. I was asked to do the same for Microsoft. And again, it took me 30 days to write the sentence I'm about to show you, because I reflected over my entire career, my entire time at Compaq. I've seen a lot of software written well and a lot of software written poorly. But again, it was about fixing what hurt most first. A decade ago, I don't believe the deployment was our biggest concern. It was writing software that our users actually wanted. We were doing waterfall back then. And what we produced 6, 7, 8 months, even a year after we took the requirements, very rarely looked like what our customers actually wanted it to look like. And it was usually buggy because we didn't even think about baking the quality into the product. What we thought about was get the features done so that we can ship it sooner, and then we would bolt on the quality later. So even after we deployed it into the environment, it very rarely worked the way that we wanted it to. So what we had to do was fix the way that we design software. And we did with Scrum and Agile, test-driven development, all these great DevOps, these great software development practices that allowed our teams to produce high quality code in a very rapid time. So then that shined a light on the fact that we still can't deploy this. If your team is running in 3-week sprints, but it still takes months to take that code and get it into the hands of our end users, we're failing. And it's shined a light on the fact that that's the part that we need to fix now. And I think that's what DevOps is here to do. It's allowing us to take the value that we're producing and quickly get it into the hands of our users. So once I was able to crystallize that in my head, I wrote this sentence. DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. The most important word is value. The only reason that you're writing this software is to deliver value to your end users. And how often should you do it? You should do it continuously. Because again, if you don't, and your competition does, your customers will happily leave you for someone else. To continuously deliver value, you have to monitor your application while it's running in production to make sure that the item that you just delivered actually did add value. Because we're under the assumption that our product backlog is in priority order. The only way to verify that is to do the first item and then monitor it in production. If no one uses it, we did not deliver value, and our product backlog is probably not in the right order, and we need to readjust it, try a different experiment, deploy something else, and see if people use that or not. And if they do, let's do more of that. So you can use the information that you gather from monitoring by trying to deliver value and drive your product backlog to make sure you're delivering the most important things first. How do we do that? It's by combining your people, your process, and the products that you use. The products and the process, that's the easy part. We've already said Agile and Scrum and Kanban and test-driven development. We know how to do these things. I'll say things like continuous integration and infrastructure as code, and all of you will be nodding even though I can't see you. But if I were to ask you, are you doing any of those things? Many of you would start saying, no, we're not doing any of those things. Why? Because of the people that you work with. The people who've been doing it the same way for 30 years and don't see any reason to change. And that's the hard part. So what I do as a program manager at Microsoft is I try to make sure that we produce the best products in the world that can enable your process to make it easier to convince your people to do the right thing. So when I say DevOps from here on out, this is what I'm saying. And that way we all can level set on the definition. Why is DevOps important? I've said it several times, because if your competition does it and you don't, you lose. And getting a customer back is really, really difficult. You have to increase your velocity. You have to go from the pit stop swinging a hammer to changing all 4 tires in less than 3 seconds. But you got to do it, but also reducing your downtime and reducing human error. Having those checks and balances, having the specialized tasks that only do one thing and do that one thing very, very well. And that's where automation comes in. It's extremely, extremely important. And what I think is interesting is that this is even more important in the mobile world than any other landscape in which we compete. For every app that's on my phone, there's at least a dozen other apps that want to do the exact same thing for me. So there's no reason for me to tolerate poor quality or a lack of innovation in your product. I can just uninstall you, give you a 1-star rating, and go install someone else, and I'll never be back again. So it's so important that you not only do DevOps correctly, but when you're dealing with mobile, it's crucial to be successful as well. One of the things that's changing is that applications, and very specifically mobile applications, have changed the way that companies compete with each other. And those who do it right have the ability to completely displace those who don't. I think Uber is one of my favorite examples. I do use Uber, and I avoid taxis like the plague. I don't buy books, hardcover books anymore, because I just download them to my Kindle. And it's just changed. My nephews are 17, 18 years old, have never seen a payphone in their life. This is the world that we live in, where software is replacing the things that we used to know and love and use every single day. And every company relies on software. You don't have to be a software company like Microsoft to benefit and use software as a strategic advantage against your competition. Ford, GE, Walmart, JP Morgan are all companies who aren't synonymous with software, but are realizing that if they don't harness the power of software, they're going to be putting themselves in a really bad situation. Harnessing the power of software means implementing a really solid DevOps pipeline. And what do I mean when I say a DevOps pipeline? It all starts with code being written by a developer and committed to a repository. That repository is going to trigger a build. We're going to run some automated tests, hopefully UI tests as well. After that, we're going to have to distribute it to our testers and then monitor the use of that application while it's out in production and get feedback and use that feedback to rinse and repeat this process. DevOps is a journey that you start and there is no end. You're constantly finding ways that you can move a little bit faster than you used to. This applies for mobile, containerized, no matter what language you write in or what platform you target. The reason you're writing that software is to do this as efficiently as you possibly can to continuously deliver value to your end users. Mobile has a lot of unique challenges. The number of apps that our customers are expecting from our vendors is growing. The amount of development, I just have to flat out say it, mobile development is hard. I get frustrated every time I have to do it. I'm connecting my Android device and my iPhone to my computer. I have to have my provisioning profiles. I have to have a Mac over here behind me. I have to have my PC in front of me. It's just painful. And that's just developing the app. Testing the app gets even worse because now I don't own all of the different platforms, operating systems, and sizes of devices to be able to effectively test my application. So when you look at the mobile landscape, it takes a lot of processes, a lot of tools to be able to effectively do this, and a lot of patience if you ask me. Historically, we had to use a whole multitude of tools. I always joke that Microsoft just bought mobile DevOps. We bought Xamarin, we bought Hockey App, we added it to VSTS, and we finally had an entire suite of tools that could allow you to rub a little DevOps on mobile and make it better. But you were still doing the Hockey App user interface and the Xamarin Test Cloud user interface, dealing with VSTS, dealing with Azure, and it just became really confusing on where I was supposed to go to do a particular task for my mobile development. So what we've decided to do is combine as much of this as we possibly can into one offering called Visual Studio App Center. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how you can use App Center with VSTS to be able to deploy an entire solution, not just the mobile front end, the entire solution. Because very rarely do we have a mobile app that doesn't have a database or rely on web services or have Docker images running somewhere that we need to be able to utilize. And what we want to be able to do is show you how you can do all of that with as few tools as possible here at Microsoft. So let's look at mobile DevOps in action. The app that we're going to be playing with is something that I call People Tracker. It's an app that I've been growing up for years. Every year when we have new technology or new features, I basically add those to this simple application. And the app isn't the star. The app is just a vehicle for me to show you how we can use Xamarin to build both Android and iOS at the exact same time. How we can use App Service inside of Azure to host my web API. How I can use Docker running on Linux inside of Azure to host my website. Use Azure Container Registry for my images and back it all with SQL Server. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a pipeline that deploys all of this automatically. But before we do that, let me show you the app. If you want to play along, you actually can. So if I can get to my correct web browser, which is this one, and you go to peopletracker.us. You can do it on your phone, you can do it on your computer right now, and you click on people. What you can do is you can just come here and create a new person, and I'll just add myself, Donovan Brown, and I click on create, and now I see Donovan Brown here as a user. But you'll notice there's no middle name. There's only a first name and last name. And what I'm going to do right here while we're together is I'm going to deploy a new version of this app. And not only this app, but also a mobile version of this app. So here is my Android device. I'm holding it in my hand, and I'm just mirroring it to the screen here. So if I go ahead and start this, you can see there's a People Tracker app here as well. And you can see that Jeffrey's participated. I've already added myself in here. I can click on add, and it just has first name and last name. My goal is to deploy a new version of the mobile app, the database, the web services, and the API all right now while we're on the phone together. And you'll all be able to play along and see your names in here in just a minute. All right, so that's the app that we're going to be dealing with. And let's talk about all the different processes we go through to deploy it. Step number one is continuous integration. If you do not have continuous integration at your organization, when you get off this meetup, and when you go back to your office, just set it up. You don't have to convince the others because none of the others will be affected. You can actually set up continuous integration against your current repository right now, and no one on your team will know that you've done it. But when one of your teammates breaks the build, you will know that they broke the build, and you won't clone the repo, you won't do a pull, and you won't have to be broken. So the whole point of this is to quickly find out if the build is still healthy or not. And if not, let everybody know, do not do a get latest, do not pull the latest changes, because you're going to be stuck waiting on someone to fix the build. So again, you do not have to convince your peers that CI is a good idea. Just implement it immediately when you get back to work if you don't already have it. And then what's going to be cool is that everyone's going to be at the water cooler. They're not going to be able to work because Donovan broke the build, but you're still working, and they're going to ask you, how are you still working? Didn't you do a get latest? Like, no, I didn't do a get latest. The CI system told me it was broken. What's a CI system? Oh, it's this cool program over here that builds our code every single time someone checks in code, and it lets me know if it's broken or not. Oh, cool. Can I watch that too? Absolutely. And you've just given CI to your entire organization without ever asking for permission or getting in trouble, and it saves you time immediately. What tool do you use for this? You can use tons of different tools, but I highly encourage you to use Visual Studio Team Services. It costs absolutely nothing to get started. It gives you unlimited private repos for free, and you can basically build even if you're not using VSTS as your Git repository. So if you're already using GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab or some other Git repository or even Subversion, you can actually still use VSTS to do your CI for you automatically. And we have a cool cloud-based build system that builds on Mac, Windows, and Linux automatically out of the box with nothing to install or configure, which is awesome. So let me go ahead and just show you what our CI system looks like. And I'm actually going to show you our CI system in action. So over here is our CI system, and I have some builds here. And I'm actually going to push a change to the remote repository to go add that middle name. So I've already made all the code changes, and I've pushed them to the remote repository. And if I refresh the screen over here, what we should see is a build should kick off over here. Let's refresh the screen. And you can see there's a build running to 2817. Now our build system can actually do things in parallel. This section up here is building an Android and iOS application on a Mac. This section in the middle is building my web API, my database project, and some of my test projects on a Windows server. And this at the bottom is using a Linux server and is building my Docker images that I'm going to use to host my ASP.NET Core application. They're building them in parallel. So instead of me having to wait for this long mobile build to finish and then go and build my Windows and then go and build my Linux, I can build them in parallel. And when they're all done, it will then kick off my release. While that's running, let me show you what the output actually looks like. So the output of this is what we call a build summary page. On this build summary page, I can see all the tasks that were executed, if they passed or failed. I can see what items, so I can see if I removed the middle name previously, but I'm adding back right now, so when I was rehearsing earlier. I can see the status of my release that went through dev, QA, and prod, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I can see the results of all the tests that I executed during this particular build. And there's two ways that I can actually orchestrate or build this build definition. One of them is I can do it graphically, which used to be my favorite way, and I'll tell you why it's not any longer. But if I come over here and click on edit, you're going to be able to see all of the different tasks that I use to build my app. On the mobile part, I basically installed my certificates and my provisioning profiles. I updated versions of files so that it would all match. I did a NuGet restore. I built my iOS. I built my Android, signed my APK, and then uploaded those as artifacts. Then on the Windows machine, I did a simple Visual Studio build, ran some unit tests, copied the files as artifacts, and then finally installed .NET Core 2.0, ran my build, ran my test, and then I actually published an image to Azure Container Registry. All of this happening in parallel. Now, why did I say this used to be my favorite way of doing it? Because now what I do, instead of graphically coming in here, going to our task library, which is enormous, by the way, and finding the task that I wanted to do and drag and drop, what I do now instead is I do it all as code. What I mean is that we now support build as code, which is called a YAML build file. Let me go back and edit this one. So instead of you seeing all the individual tasks that you saw before, all you see is this one file. In this file is where I define all of those exact same build steps. I can do it in code, and upon every commit, I can change my build definition. So if I were to come over here to code really quickly and show you this particular file, you'll see that it's just a YAML file. It has my Mac phase in it, It has where I build all of my Mac information and my iOS and Android. Here it has my Windows phase in it, and it has all of the information for my Windows components. And then down here, it has my Linux phase. And because the phases aren't dependent upon each other, they all run in parallel. If I needed one phase to wait for another, I would simply tell this phase that you depend on another phase, and it would wait before it builds. Another thing I kind of glossed over, but I want to show, double click on real quick about our CI system, is where you can actually do the builds. Anything that starts with the word hosted is hosted for you in Azure or another cloud provider, because we don't have Macs in Azure, right? So we have a third party that we use that has a pool of Macs that we already pre-configured for you that you can use without installing anything. So we have Linux, Mac, and 2 Windows servers just waiting for you. I also have private agents. I like private agents because I can install other stuff on there. I'm the only person in line waiting for them. And I have a pretty powerful Mac that I run all of my agents off of using Parallels, so they build really, really fast. So you can use private agents that you can install on-prem or in the cloud, or you can use hosted agents that we already host for you without you having to install anything. So again, when you get back to work, do yourself a favor and set up continuous integration and continuous delivery. It's a no-brainer, and no one has to know that you did it. So like, oh, I have to go convince my peers. No, you don't. Just go do it, and they're going to wonder why you're being more productive than they are. So it looks like our build is almost done here. I'm just going to kind of take one last peek at it and see where we are. Cool. So it's already built Android, it's built iOS, and it's getting ready to publish all that stuff out. So that's a very, very quick tour of what we can do with our build system. The tasks that we're running here, I can actually write them myself. I can use the hundreds that come out of the box, or I can go to our marketplace where I can actually download free extensions that add new build tasks that allow me to do all kinds of cool stuff during my build. Remember, this works on any language and any platform. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hop back over to our presentation here. And when I do that, Jeffrey, have there been any questions before I move along?
We do have one question.
Okay.
And it's from Robbie. What do you use to write and validate the YAML files?
Oh, good question. So let me hop back real quick. I didn't write anything, because I hate writing YAML, because if you put a tab instead of a space, all hell breaks loose. It's just a nightmare. So what I did is I used my old favorite way, and I'll show you how I did this, to generate the file that I needed for the new way. So if I go to build definitions here, and I go to the original build definition, this is where I just dragged and dropped. I built everything, configured it just the way that I wanted to configure it, and I clicked on this button right here that says View YAML. And there it was. That's all the YAML that I need to be able to just plop into that file and get my build to actually run. Now, if you have any protected values, like encrypted passwords, for example, if I come over here to variables, you can actually encrypt a lot of these variables, right? Where people can't see them. You would have to go back in after the build is created and re-add those variables, because we're not going to put them in your YAML file in plain text. So what you would do is create the build definition and then go back in and define these and encrypt them again, and then we'll be able to pull them down for you as part of your YAML build. But I did not write a single line of YAML to get this to work. I just built it, exported it, and then used that as my file. You can just write it by hand if you want to, but we all know the pains of YAML. Is that the only question?
That's the only question so far.
Perfect. Okay, so let's move away from from continuous integration and move into testing and deployment. Testing on mobile is a nightmare, and deploying mobile applications can also be a challenge, because historically, the only way to get your app onto a dev phone was through a cable like this one. And it made it very difficult for you to have a lot of testers, because they all had to tether their device to be able to get the latest fix. We've solved all that for you. So we use release management, which I'll show you here in just a moment, that allows you to take your bits, your APK files, your IPA files, and not only deploy them to your devices so that you can test them wirelessly, but we also allow you to upload them to our test cloud where you can run your test on physical devices. These are not emulators, they are not simulators. There's actually a data center full of thousands of devices just waiting to do your builds for you. I've actually seen it. It's pretty neat to see just rack and rack and rack and shelf after shelf after shelf of every imaginable phone you can imagine. And then they just light up all of a sudden while they get a request to run a test. We install your software, we run your automated test on there, and we pipe back the results for you automatically. Release management basically takes what we did in build and puts it on steroids. It allows you to have approvers, multiple environments, you can still have multiple phases, and you can still have Mac, Windows, and Linux side by side, but you can now do really cool things like have your QA environment owned by your QA team. And you cannot deploy inside there unless the QA lead says it's okay to deploy inside there. And we can actually automate that by putting them as an approver of the QA environment. The code will rush through dev, do any testing in dev you want it to do, and then ask for permission to please deploy into the QA environment, where your QA lead now has complete control over the timing, when and where that deployment actually happens automatically when it's convenient for them. Once they give their approval, the automatic deployment will happen. They can go and do their testing on that particular environment. And then we can even do automatic gates as well, where we have our tool run additional tests to make sure that everything deployed successfully, and then give you a signal saying it's okay for you to move into the next environment or not. Testing on mobile is a flat out nightmare. And the reason why is this picture. There are so many different shapes, sizes, operating systems, resolutions, form factors, it just makes it a nightmare. No one in their right mind should even attempt to buy all of the devices that they would need. And the more obscure the device, the more difficult it is to find. But we have a great collection of devices in our lab where you will be able to find the device you need to be able to go ahead and run your test on there. And it's an amazing experience. You can actually upload your IPA or APK file with your test, and then we will go and actually execute it for you on all these different devices, Android and iOS, and allow you to see the screens of the test as it's being executed. So if you needed to see what was happening when that bug happened, you'll actually be able to see a screenshot of it. And if you want more, if you have a lot of animations you want to verify, you can actually create a recording versus just a snapshot and actually see the test running in real time. So let me go show you what release management looks like and how we implement the testing as well. So we're going to come back over to here. And what we have now, I was moving off here, this is release management. It's very similar, again, to build, and you'll see why in just a second. But here, these little people icon allow me to have approvers before or after. I can have continuous delivery, which means when this build is done, you should automatically start running this particular release. And what's inside this release? Just another series of tasks. Now, we don't have YAML for our release yet, but it is coming. And remember, I said we need to deploy the entire environment. Here, we're deploying any database changes. Because for me to add middle name means I have to add a new column to our database. And with this one task, I'm able to take those changes and automatically apply them to the target database without a developer writing a single line of SQL. I also do infrastructure as code, which means I could delete my entire dev environment. And this one task will stand that entire environment back up for me. All the VMs I need, storages I need, databases, webs, everything gets stood up for me automatically. If it's already there, this is essentially a no-op. It just verifies that everything looks the way it's supposed to. And then if it is good, it just goes to the next step. If not, it will correct it or create it if it's missing. From there, we go and we basically use app service to run our middle tier, which is our web API. And what I do is I stop the service. And what I'm doing here is I'm stopping one slot of the service. I'm using deployment slots, which means I have a production slot, which is where all the traffic is going. And I have a staging slot behind it that looks exactly the same. That's where I do my deployment. I can take 20 minutes if I needed to copy all the files there and do testing. All the while, the production slot is taking in all the traffic, and none of my customers are ever impeded by my deployment. Then what I do is I start up the slot that I just deployed to, and then I swap it into the production slot. So it's a zero downtime deployment, making sure that your customers are never impacted by you having to do an update. Then what I do is I come over to my Docker host. So I could be using Kubernetes. I could be using some other orchestrator if I wanted to. For this demo, I literally just have one Linux machine running in Azure that hosts my Docker images. So what I do very easily is I stop the current image, and then I start up the new image. If you were doing something like Kubernetes, you would just go ahead and use the tools to automatically roll that up with no downtime there as well. Luckily, my images are small. This usually takes a couple of milliseconds. It's really, really quick. Then what I do is I fire up Selenium, and I actually hit the web site to go off and actually add a user to the database to verify that my database, my middle tier, and my front end have been deployed successfully. If and only if those Selenium tests pass, do I finally use App Center to go ahead and tell my beta testers on Android and iOS that there's a new version of the app for you that you can go and download and start testing on your device. Then what I do, because this takes a while, is I run my test inside the Xamarin Test Cloud. And then I'll get a notification letting me know if those passed or failed. Now what I do is I continue this. This is the dev environment. But if I were to come over here and show you what I do in QA, it looks very, very similar. But in addition to running the Selenium test, I also run a performance test against that environment. My QA environment and my production environment are very similar. So I can now run performance tests against my QA environment to make sure that none of the changes that I've made are going to impact our performance in any way before I go ahead and release into production. Then I use App Center again to use Test Flight and Google Beta to make sure that I can distribute it to a larger group of people to go ahead and test my app. And then finally, if I come over to production, you'll see that I do the exact same thing, but I have to do 2 different phases here. The reason why is because to deploy to the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, I need to be on a Mac. To deploy the rest of it, I can be on a Windows machine. So I split my production environment into 2 phases, one where I deploy my backend and one where I actually release my applications to the actual store themselves. So now if I go back here and I look at my releases, let's see if we're going to be lucky today. So right now you can see it's actually running in my current release. And let's see how far it's gotten. I can monitor this. If I click on my logs here, we can see that it's all back to the point to where it's running our post-deployment gates. And I didn't explain that for you, so let me go back real quick and show you what that looks like. So if I come over here and I come to this guy here, I have these gates. And what I've told it to do is that there's a REST API that I want you to hit, and I make sure that that REST API comes back successful before you even let me know that it's safe for me to move to the next environment. You can do a lot of cool stuff here. You can call Azure functions, REST APIs, you can write your own, you can run queries against your bug system. So let's say, for example, you've deployed the code, your people are using it, and someone logs a bug. You can actually have our tool run queries against your bugs and see if any new bugs are logged, and if so, completely kill your release for you. And right now, my tool is off there running the REST API call to make sure that my API is stood up successfully. And then let's go talk about testing. So if I come over here, this is App Center, and I have my application selected, and I can see test runs, distribution, which we'll talk about in a minute, and diagnostics, we'll talk about later. But here you can see the runs that I've done in the past. And if I click on one of these, you can see that I ran this test on Android, I ran it on 2 different devices, and both of the devices passed. And if I click on the test itself, I can see the screens that I actually would see on my app if I were to go through and actually test this. So when I tested this particular app, I entered in my name, entered in my last name, middle name, I saved this information, and I can see all that information right here on the screen, which is really nice. And all this thing does is make sure that the app will actually launch. If the app doesn't launch, then obviously this test would fail. And we actually were running these tests as part of our DevOps pipeline. So again, you're no longer having to manually do things, stop what you're doing, and go find out where you need to be. All this information happens for you in real time as part of your DevOps pipeline, thanks to the integration of Teams services and App Center. So let's talk about distribution. Distribution is how you get your app that's now ready for testing into the hands of your beta testers. Like I said, historically, that's been difficult because you had to be tethered to a piece of wire to get the app to your phone. But when we acquired Hockey App, we acquired this amazing technology that allowed you to sideload your app onto your device, even if it's not wired. And as you can see, my app is not wired to anything. So I'm mirroring it through an application, but I'm not tethered to my box. And the reason that that's important is because what I'm about to show you is how I can get that code onto this particular device. So we want you to be able to do this so that you can get that feedback from your beta testers as quickly and easily as possible. They can take the latest bits, start using those bits, give you that feedback to make sure that what you're about to give to your customers is of high quality. The way that that happens is the person opens up the app, and then they're presented this dialogue that says, hey, would you like to see the new version of the code? They can see the release notes of that particular code, decide if they want to take it or not. And when they start using it, I can get crash reporting, I can get feedback, and it really helps us determine the quality of the code that we're about to deploy. You also have to monitor your app while it's running in real time. It's not just about crashes. It's about how many people use your app. Where in the world are they using your app? How many times a day do they use it? They just install it and never use it? That's the kind of information that you need to make sure that you go back in there and fine-tune your application to truly deliver value. Crashes are clearly important, but you can't underestimate just monitoring the activity and the analytics of your particular application. Before, we had Hockey App and we had Xamarin Insights, and we've combined those together in analytics inside of App Center that allows you to see, again, how many sessions per day, which is the most popular device using your application, what crashes that you're having, how many active users that you have per month, so that you can go back in and try new campaigns, try new experiments to see how you can increase the usage of your particular application. So let's go through a really quick demonstration of how the distribution actually works on the actual application. And this will be the last demo, and then I'll go in and I'll answer questions for the rest of the time. So let's go ahead and switch back over, and I'm going to show you my phone. So here's my mobile phone again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close this app out. And then I'm going to fire it back up again. And when I do, I'm going to be prompted with a dialog box. See, there's a new version of the app available. I can click on View Release Notes. It'll tell me that I've added a middle name. And if I want to, I can just click Download right here on the screen. When I click on Download, I'm going to be prompted to install the application. And again, without any wires attached, it's installing the application on my particular device. Now that it's installed, I can go back in and I can use the application. If I wanted to, I could check the version real quick. So down at the bottom, I can see that I have 2817 installed. So that's the latest version. I can also confirm that because now if I were to come and look at the people here, that last user has a middle initial E. And if I were to go and update myself, for example, I could come over here, put in my middle initial, and go ahead and save this information. And now I can see that this has been saved. And on this list now, I actually have a middle name. So right here, within a couple of minutes, I actually deployed an entirely new application, database changes, new mobile app, and new front end. So if I were to come back over here, for example, and go to People Tracker, this is the website that I have loaded on my app, on my phone. Let me refresh this. And if I were to go over to People, I'm going to see the exact same information. And you can see there's a new middle name column there that wasn't there earlier. So this middle name was added while you all were actually able to use the application. I can come in here if I wanted to, and let's see. Leroy, that's not my middle name. Nice try, that's a pretty good guess. That's good. Yeah, I need to put some security on here. So the next feature is going to be making sure you have to log in before you change someone else's name. That's pretty good. No one's done that before. All right, so as you can see, I was able to change both apps right away, right in front of us. The other thing I wanted to show you is some of the cool stuff that we can do from App Center when it comes to distribution. So let me hide my phone again. And here, what we're going to do is go to distribution. So underneath the distribution, I can see the different groups. So if I wanted to have larger areas of testers, maybe I have beta testers, alpha testers, general availability testers, I could actually have different groups here. And then using that task inside of VSTS, simply deploy it and distribute it to those different groups. I can also come in here and deploy straight to the store. So again, if I needed to go to the Google Play Store or to the App Store, that's all controlled for you right here from inside of App Center. I can also go back in here and review all of the different releases. So as you can see, I've been rehearsing this for a day or two to make sure that everything was going to work the way it was supposed to for you. And I can go back in and see all of the different releases, how many times they've been downloaded, and I can also do some really cool stuff about crash analytics. So I can actually crash the app I already have. If you were to go into the mobile app, say you want to create a person, click on cancel, it actually throws an exception. And the reason I put that in there is so that I can show you some cool stuff like this, where it actually shows me how many crashes have happened per day, what device is mostly affected. It lets me see exactly what the call stack is for that particular item, which is really powerful as well. I can click on one of these particular devices, and I can actually see the history of the usage of that particular crash. The person logged into the app, they listed the people, they added a person, they started to add a person, and then when they went to do the ad, the app crashed. But from the call stack, I can see that they were on clicking the cancel button. So they started to add someone, clicked cancel, and then the application actually crashed. And here I can see the exception that was actually thrown in the entire call stack. So having this type of information can really quickly help you pinpoint where the problem is. I don't have to fire up another device and go try to reproduce this. I know exactly where I need to go. I need to go into my create or edit method. I need to go to my on click, and I need to go and do some testing to see if that's actually going to crash for me or not. All my exceptions are actually handled here for me. And another thing that's really cool is I've actually tracked this information inside of VSTS. You can wire up App Center to VSTS so that these crashes actually turn into bugs over here. So on the right-hand side, you can see all these came from App Center. They were automatically created and show me the same information that was in the failure inside of App Center. So now my developers can't run from this. Every time the app crashes, they get a bug that they now have to go back in there and address right inside of the tool that they're currently using today. Another thing that we have is analytics. So we can see the active users, the top devices, session durations, the countries that the app is actually being used in. Our test center is in Denmark, which is why every time I upload it to the Xamarin Test Cloud to go and run it, that's where they're actually being executed. Well, my devices are here in the United States. Another thing that's really cool is that you can have custom events. So I have events telling me every time that someone views the details, every time someone edits a person, every time someone runs the list, I can actually see that information. Let me show you really quickly how I enabled that. So in my source code, transitioning from Hockey App to App Center has been really nice because the amount of code I have to write has been drastically reduced. For me to have the analytics, the crash, and distribution, it's this single line of code. I simply call App Center start. I tell it which keys I needed to look for my applications, and then what features I want to use. Because you can use as much or as little of App Center as you like. You don't have to use it all. If you only care about crashes, you can use it just for crashes. If you only care about distribution, you can use it just for your distribution and use someone else for your analytics and crashing. It's not an all or nothing. It's as little or as much as you like. And then how do I do all that custom telemetry? I simply made a single call like this. Every time they come in and ask to get people, I simply send out this little event, and those events get aggregated for me inside of the portal, inside of App Center. So again, what we're doing here at Microsoft is making sure that you can take your mobile development and deploy the entire solution. And I can't stress that enough. I did not just deploy the app. I deployed the app, the front end, the database, the Docker containers, the app service, the infrastructure, everything. And I did it within like probably 12 minutes, right? Because we talked for a while, I finally pushed in code, and 12 minutes later, we have a new app completely deployed out into production using what we have here at Microsoft. So at this point, we have about 10 minutes left, or 12 minutes left. And Jeffrey, I am open for all the questions you can possibly want to ask me for the next 12 minutes. I got through that faster than I thought. Cool.
So attendees, go ahead and put questions in the question and answer pane at the bottom of your Zoom window. We do have a question from David Walker, and it's actually expanding on the YAML feature.
Okay.
And the question is, any plans to be able to import YAML and then be able to change the steps visually, or any plans for a YAML editor or an SDK of some type, thinking about the experience months down the line once it's been exported to YAML for a long time?
Great question. I know for a fact that the build team has gotten that feedback because I gave it to them. Right? Because that is like the first thing that I asked was like, hold on, man. I really like the way that our build looks. So, I mean, you kind of get spoiled being able to view your build definitions visually like this. I don't like that black box of it's just one line and then all this magic happens. I kind of like to see it this way. So it is definitely on their backlog. I've asked multiple times. I bring it up every time they talk to me about YAML. I'm like, yeah, that's great. I kind of want the best of both worlds. I want to be able to see it like this, but also manipulate the file if I need to. And we have to figure out a way to get that visualization. So where it is on the backlog, that I don't know. But I know it's on the backlog because I specifically put it there myself, because I completely agree with you. I cannot tell you how many builds failed when I'm screwing around with YAML because I screwed around with the YAML, right? And I actually hit a tab versus a space, or it wasn't indented quite right. And YAML can be very painful. So I know it's on the roadmap. Where it is, I do not know. As soon as I know, trust me, the best way to get a hold of me is on Twitter. I'll bring it up so that you can see it. I will tweet the fact that that comes out, right? I will simply say, hey, look, I'm at Donovan Brown on Twitter. If that new feature comes out, I will be the first one to tweet about this is where you want to go to see that stuff.
Another question, when will we be able to use YAML for the deployment configurations?
That I know, that is sooner than the other request, right? Again, I don't know the roadmap, but if you are on Twitter, ask me that again, and what I will ask, actually, I'll do it right now. This is what I do all the time. I know the people who own all that stuff. So I'm just going to ask them, hey, Gopi, when will we have YAML for release? So when you ask me questions, I simply go and ask the people that I know inside of Microsoft that work on that particular product, and now everyone will get the answer whenever Gopi replies to us on when that's actually coming. I'm sure he's going to say in the future or something silly, but well, I'll give you the best answer that I can get you, and then I'll stay on top of them to make sure that they hear that. And if you are on Twitter, retweeting or liking that is going to make sure that Gopi knows that he should be paying attention to that particular item. Another place that you can go is actually user voice. User voice is where you can go and actually give us ideas and then upvote those ideas. And if they make it to the top of the list, they will get addressed by our team. It's just that simple.
All right, one more question.
Sure.
Auto bugs from App Center exceptions. well, I'm just going to read it as it's worded.
Okay.
Can set it up so it isn't duplicated. At least it looks like the same exception was creating new bugs in VSTS. Is that the case?
Got it. So yes, you can actually control that. So if I were to come over here to services, and I have my bug tracker already connected here, and if I go to configure, I can say how many crashes before I get a bug. So I want 5 of them before you create a new ticket. You can actually control that completely. I just have it as 1 because demos, it's kind of more dramatic to see all those bugs in there. That's the only reason I have it configured that way, is because I just wanted it to be more data versus less data. But you're absolutely in complete control over how often those tickets are going to get created.
All right, any other questions? This is your chance to put them into the Q&A window and get Donovan to answer them.
Thanks for spending your lunch with me too. I know how precious that time is, so thanks for hanging out with me today.
All right, looks like we've answered all the questions.
Cool, and now you guys can rush to your next meetings as well.
All right, everyone, if you are on Twitter, give Donovan some tweet love. Tell him a public thank you, and we certainly appreciate him. Donovan, thanks so much for being with us at the Microsoft DevOps User Group. If anyone could not come, we'll have this recording online, and we'll distribute it out and send it out to the meetup discussion list as well as tweet it. And look forward on the calendar for upcoming presentations.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. Everyone have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.